to the March 21 Avon Board of Education meeting. We're calling the meeting to order at 7:02. Welcome. And I believe I've not asked Mr. Spivak in a while to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would you be so kind?
Yes. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It looks slightly hidden.
Flag etiquette.
All right, at this point, I propose to amend the agenda and we'll make a motion to that effect with the following items. Under the superintendent's report, an item regarding update of the district mission statement. Under executive session, discussion of a personnel matter, evaluation of the superintendent, and a second one, settlement of a legal matter. May I have a second?
Second.
I think Mr. Burke got there first. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstention? Any opposition? Carries unanimously. We have the minutes. Any discussion of the minutes? May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Oh, go ahead. I think the light's not working.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? I am acknowledging that there were a couple of corrections that were sent. On page 7, the supplemental appropriation, it says, mentions that revenue not yet received. It was requested, and it makes sense to change that to revenue received in excess of amount budgeted. Okay, so that's one change. At the bottom of the page, there is a sentence in the expulsion protocol that reads, "The superintendent has no standing to overrule expulsions that are recommended by principals." That will be changed to, "The superintendent has no authority to discipline students and can't overrule suspensions or expulsions that are recommended by principals." The page 9, the motion for the crew program update. The motion that was made to allow Mr. Mala authority to enter into a contract with crew to practice at another body of water and or to enter into a revised agreement with the city of Hartford if necessary. There was another minor correction on an error that we'll fix regarding dine and discuss was described as full day. It's not full day. It's 2 hour. And those are the changes that need to be made.
So shall I take that as a motion to approve the minutes with those changes?
With those amendments, yes, please.
All right, Mrs. Rowell, second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Carries unanimously then. All right. Communications from the public. Don't be shy. Someone surely has to say something if there's this many of you. No, apparently not. You'll have something after. All right. Well, that sometimes is a little bit later in the evening, and if you would like to stay that long, we would certainly encourage you, because usually the audience is empty by then, at the risk of being jocular. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. We really have nothing. Okay. Report from the student representatives. Mr. Wild, Ms. Monroe. Who goes to go? Oh, Ms. Monroe's reaching for the think so. She's going first today, all right.
Okay, so last Friday we had a dance, a St. Patrick's Day dance that was originally a Valentine's Day dance that got canceled because of snow, I believe. And it was very successful, and the turnout was much better than it was last year. And also the sports training just began for the spring season. And April 28th, the weekend of April 28th through the 30th is the production of Seussical the Musical, which is what we're doing here at the high school.
I'm sorry, the 28th of what?
April.
April. Oh, wow.
This week, or maybe it was last week, members of the Mohegan tribe came to speak about Native American culture and cultural appropriation here. The Avon High School swim team finished in 4th place at the state finals. We just finished, hopefully, AP exam registration. And Bandapalooza was rescheduled for tomorrow, Wednesday, March 22nd. And it's performances from Thompson Brook, Avon Middle School, and the Avon High School bands, and it's in the new gym here. That's it.
Thank you. Questions of our student reps?
You know what time it is, Mark? I think it's 7.
We'll check.
All right. Mrs. Bashad, you're up next with the financial report.
So February saw the first journal entry for the health portion of the employer contribution, totaling $2.5 million in change for payroll activity July 1 through January. I'll do the other journal entry once we've completed the year. I also journaled the $650,000 administration fee that we pay to Cigna, so you will see that severe activity in the 200 level object codes. And I also wanted to update you, the second payment was made for transportation during the month of February for $950,000. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, and we reached that stage in the budgeting process where, reading it very carefully, as I have to do with my bifocals, it looks like we're slightly in the surplus to the tune of $335,000?
Would be my current estimate.
Current estimate, okay. Recognizing that things sometimes happen. Any questions? All right, moving right along. Consent calendar. Does anyone care to remove anything?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
All right, Mrs. Rell moves. Anyone care to second?
Second.
Mrs. Flake? All right. Any discussion? No? All in favor? Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Carried unanimously. I think that's the largest consent calendar we've ever had. No business. Under old business, new business, bullying and prevention first read, and various regulations.
Okay, so page 79 is the start of the edits for the bullying prevention and intervention that we discussed. Got some questions over the weekend from a board member that prompted me to look at several things. So there, we would likely be looking to make some changes between this one and a form. I'll bring that up in a minute. One of the requests was to add in here a statement to the effect that any reports of suspected bullying will be investigated promptly. So that's something we will discuss at the policy committee, but I thought that was worthwhile noting tonight. At the top, what I will point out that the policy subcommittee needs to address is it mentions that we're going to be a school that's free from bullying, teen dating violence, harassment, and discrimination. And I have to admit, I didn't analyze that, nor did the committee.
Because when you look at the form, it speaks to bullying and teen dating violence only. So I'd like to be consistent everywhere. I think it makes sense. So we'll analyze that. We have a separate discrimination policy, so I'm not sure what we want to do about that, saying that again here. And we do define what bullying is, so it may be that it will read free from bullying and teen dating violence, but I don't want to speak for the committee. So that's something we're looking at. And we will be adding in, or making it the same in the regulation on page 83. Yes.
But is there a separate policy on discrimination?
Yes, yeah.
But that's not included?
Not included here, it's separate, and it's for students. We have one for students and one for staff.
So when you say something about the consistency, does that mean that you're going to have a separate form? Or
Well, discrimination has its own policy.
it
So
says there's a form? that-
there's a form at page 97 for the bullying prevention, and it's inconsistent with the policy here on page 79. So we want to make it consistent.
Yeah.
It shouldn't read differently. It speaks to just bullying or teen dating violence. It also is missing a few things that should be added to it. And that was pointed out again by Peggy, went through thoroughly, and she made some wonderful comments, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
So the policy subcommittee, and that was sent to everyone, the questions, and then the answers were sent to everyone, so it did indicate this, the policy committee would be visiting these questions, and so, but I did want to highlight it, because I just want to make sure it was clear that we'll take a good hard look at it. The goal with analyzing this policy once again was to make it, the policy itself more concise and more for, easier to read and understand for layman purposes. And then the regulation should have the specifics of the statute, and everything that is needed is in the regulation.
I'm confused what you're saying about discrimination, about the form as it relates to discrimination. That you
What I'm
want to
saying-
include that on
What
here?
I'm saying is on page 79, it says bullying, teen dating violence, harassment, and discrimination.
So you're going to take those out? Is that what you're saying?
We're going to discuss what's appropriate to have in the bullying prevention policy. And I'd like it, there's 2 points. What's appropriate to have here, again, we're talking bullying prevention. I'm not sure why we have all these words. And we don't have all these words in each location of the policy, regulation, and form. So whatever we decide needs to be consistent in the policy, the regulation, and the form.
Okay.
And if we have a policy that addresses something already, why would we put it 2 places? Because then you have to consistently update each policy every time there's a change.
Okay.
So that's what I'd like the committee to analyze. Okay. And then the next policy for discussion. Let's look at the agenda.
Basis for grading.
Well, I go in order. So numerical order would be regulation, administrative regulation 5144. 5144 is, you're not going to find a page, so I apologize. Today, I believe, Gary sent out an email. What we did in the committee was we looked at the bullying prevention policy side by side with discipline, because they are related. So we looked at that, and the discipline policy was recently reviewed thoroughly by administration, and we were told that there was There were no changes that they felt were necessary. So the one piece we looked at, given the conversations that have been taking place about suspensions and expulsions, was would it make sense to add to the regulations? So Gary developed 2 charts that will be added to the administrative regulations for 5144, and he sent that to us today.
May I?
Sure.
You've seen one already. It's the expulsion protocol. The one that's added is the discipline protocol. You asked me to create a similar chart that summarizes how building level leaders manage discipline intervention. So that's what you have.
So I'd like you all to, take a look through that. You got it today. Obviously, I'm not expecting it tonight. But take a look at that and let us know your comments. And the policy subcommittee will address this at its April meeting. Okay, now, continuing in numerical order, 6146.1. So basis for grading, which is page 103. And again, I believe we had an email today, though, with the helpful, is that correct? With the difference of what the committee, okay, couple things. We had several students come to our February meeting, and they presented what has happened with regards to the grading GPA change and how it's calculated, and what has happened from their perspective, and they presented very thorough viewpoints on what has happened in their mind to them based on the grading changes, the GPA changes. So the committee considered what was stated and wanted to get a look at comparative where we stand with our GPA, with other surrounding towns, and a number of other things that we talked about that we would like to take a look at. Recall that changes were proposed, numerous changes were proposed 2 years ago by the former principal, Chris Tranberg, and the changes were taken and made, and the board had requested that there be updates on a regular basis as to how the changes were being implemented and effects that they had on the students, and how was it working, how was it not working. Well, clearly with transition and not having a principal, permanent principal in place, we haven't been able to get the updates that we were interested in receiving on a regular basis. So that said, again, when the students came forward and shared their very personal stories, which were forwarded to everybody to listen to, the recordings, the committee took that under advisement and has proposed that the GPA weighting grade be reversed to what it once was, which was instead of the current spread of 0.33, it would be a spread of 0.67. That was sent in a separate email.
It was sent yesterday to you. I'm hopeful that you all received the questions that were raised with respect to the packet. And in our customary fashion, we provide the response in red, bold font. So I'm hoping you got that. I did attach it separate from the document because I scanned it. It's actually it's in your packet on page 104.
Well, that's the
Right.
current one.
That's right.
But
I just wanted to give you both.
yeah, so we do have the current, but what the committee is proposing is having us revert back to what it once was, just with the GPA. We would not change anything else. We're not talking about changing the collapse, the levels. We're still giving credit for electives. I think those are the major changes for this one. So that is one thing. The other piece I'm going to have to turn over to the chair because he had proposed a normalized GPA be included as well.
Well, let me
How would you do it?
sort of throw this out, and I just a comment to the superintendent. I assume the administration will be taking a position on this next month at some point?
Yes.
Okay, all right. One of the issues that I raised, actually I raised two issues. One, just harkening back to when I was a student, which was when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, we had a full point between grading systems, which frankly was easy for me to understand, and I understand that would be a change that's not going back to the old system. So I understand that may not be well received, certainly with no input from the high school. Then one of the questions that I raised, because when you have students applying to colleges, colleges tend to recalculate their GPAs. The number of ways they recalculate it is as varied as the number of colleges, so there literally are thousands of ways. There is a way, if we wanted to do it, and my proposal would be to make it elective, to say a student with an SAT of fill in the blank, spread on a national curve, their GPA would be a notional whatever it is. So that the school, the colleges would be able to say, all right, a 3.67 from Avon High with an SAT of this would normally end up with a grade of, I don't know how the grades normally run. I assume it's 2 or 4.0. That would be normally like a 3.98 or something. My suggestion would be to fix that so that it was an opt-in, so that people wouldn't have to do it if they didn't want to do it. So that was my suggestion. I don't know if anyone would care to comment on any of those, because those are sort of, shall we say, discussions. And this obviously came with no particular recommendation from the high school, because we have an interim principal, so this is unusual in the sense that it is a student-originated change. Would that be fair?
Yes.
All right, so I would then propose to throw it open to Connor and
Heather.
Heather as to whether or not they have any suggestions or comments that they would like to make at this point. I understand officially it doesn't affect you, so you probably don't have a dog in this fight, as they say, but you might have some comments.
Well, I was on the committee with Mr. Tranberg that made the recommendations initially. I was very behind the changes that were made, so I don't know what the points the students were making. I think that's my only question, is if it really has affected students. I do know in a lot of that time with the committee, it was all about anyone who came to speak to us, they're going to recalculate it anyway, stop worrying about it. I mean, it does affect you in scholarship situations where some will take your weighted GPA especially.
But don't they recalculate it?
Not always for scholarships. Sometimes they will just take your weighted. So not necessarily if you were applying to a school for a scholarship, like a scholarship within a school, but just some outside group, often they'll just take your weighted, and that'll be it. That's at least the experience I have with it, but again, I just don't know how it's negatively affected students.
So the students shared, one was, the point was that there's not much of an incentive to take honors or AP when the weighting is so close. Why not just go for the easy A? Mm-hmm. And in effect, you've got some very intelligent folks that should be taking a higher level stretching their brain, mm-hmm. But the A is if it's a guaranteed for them in a CP class, and then the discussion is also, well, that's really not fair for skewing. Maybe if there is a curve, there is no curve when you've got the 100, mm-hmm. Which is what they can get easily. So there was that discussion was kind of skews each class, and also there was a specific example where that they were told, and talking with guidance, talking with the college, that they missed a cutoff by like 0.2 for a school that was their number one school, and they were told that was why. So, the students saying, well, why should I take AP and honors classes if I could have had a straight? So
Right.
that was where they were sharing that.
Well, I do think now that the academic level has been dropped, there's probably a greater divide of not having that incentive. Because I remember when we made this change, it was, I can't remember specifically, but academic, could you not even reach a 4.0?
Right.
Right, if you're taking, so that was the purpose behind that, so maybe it does make more sense now after losing the academic level, but I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I want to revisit your question because quite frankly, I got caught flat-footed. I was not aware that you wanted me to make a recommendation. It's going to be.
Not now, but.
No, we're prepared.
Okay.
The administration's prepared, and we were prepared at the policy subcommittee as well. So what's been put on the table as reverting back to the old GPA calculation system is exactly what we're recommending that you do. And I stated my views on the position at the last policy subcommittee, and you're free to listen to the recording.
Well, I don't really see I'm on the same page as Connor, really. I didn't see the impact, I guess, that it had on some people.
So I wasn't at the policy committee. How many students came to speak before, and was it a diverse group of students that represented different viewpoints?
2 students came. You were provided their recording.
Yeah.
So that everybody could hear what they had to say.
I'm just trying to make a point that, I don't know what the perspective of these 2 particular students were, but previously there was a whole committee that looked at it with various student viewpoints, and I just want to put that out there, that I'm just, I don't know, maybe it needs more consideration.
And I'll let Jay speak too, but I just want to say we appreciate the committee's work, and we took in and did all the changes that the committee suggested. I specifically, and I think I've clarified this on many occasions, requested regular updates to understand how this impacted students, and that they were supported, and that it was a positive overall, and have been unable to get the answers to my questions done, in large part because of this transition issue that we have faced. So also Jay provided significant data points showing that we are now an outlier with where we are with our weighting from all surrounding towns. With that, I'm going to let Jay speak.
You can go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I was at one of the 2 policy meetings where we did discuss this, and I'm hesitant, even though the information that was provided to us was helpful, I'm hesitant to be asked to make a decision on a first read when our policy is to expect a second read. Okay. So I want to make sure that we're only discussing it tonight. Okay. Just wanted to be clear.
No, usually a first read does not entail a significant discussion. I thought this was unusual enough that we should have a discussion during the first read to make sure that everybody can think about it, so we're ready for the second read.
Okay.
The student discussions apparently appear at minute 35, so as I was driving to work, I only had the first 30 minutes, so I haven't actually heard their discussion, but I'm going to listen to it.
Very well.
Mr. Spivak.
Yes, I actually share Kathy's view in the sense that the way the GPA is now set up is actually a disincentive for students to challenge themselves, and as our superintendent says, to push their learning to a new level to help them develop as students. And the common practice is actually to have an A in college prep as a 4.0, but that's not what we have in place. I served on the committee with Connor, so we spent a lot of time discussing a lot of issues, but we never had data, and we were never shown what other districts did in terms of their GPA. We were just presented that this is a better way for collapsing levels, and there was going to be a transition at the high school, which I don't think has taken place in the past 2 years. So that's why I think this needs to be corrected. The data I presented at the policy subcommittee was interesting because one of the examples we were given was Simsbury, which is at a 0.5 difference between college prep and honors, and they've subsequently extended the gap to be even greater. So they've now gone to 0.67 for AP. So they're going the opposite direction of what we've done. And as Kathy says, we're now the outlier. You look at Glastonbury and Greenwich actually follow what our chair says is a full point higher for honors and AP, and we're at 0.33 for honors, so a big difference from a full point. And then a couple of districts I was just looking at, upper level districts like Weston and Staples, they do similar to what we had in place before, which we're considering going back to. 0.7 for honors is what they have, or 0.67 for Staples, and 1 point higher for AP. So shows that we are much different than the others. I understand that a lot of the colleges do recalculate it anyways, but I've seen enough examples and from those students' stories where it has harmed students and does not, as I said before, give them the incentive to take the more challenging course. And I know, plenty of times we talk about having that conversation, and this doesn't help that situation.
And another feature, although I'm sure it must be obvious to everybody, is that the ranking, the relative ranking between all the levels is not the same. So there is in fact a hump, as it were, between honors and college prep, because instead of being a 0.33, it's a 0.67. So when you go from college prep to honors, you get a much bigger bump. So it's not a smooth surface, it's not linear, it's a discontinuous function, if I believe my geometry.
And what's your point? And that's what you're supporting?
Well, no, I'm not saying I'm supporting it, I'm just pointing it out. I'm not a fan of doing that. Go ahead.
I too was on the committee, and I had a great time, and I feel like we learned a lot. I absolutely supported the changes that we made, but I'm open to learning more as the month goes on. I appreciate the recommendation from administration. Where I sit today, I wouldn't support reverting back. I think some of the changes we made were intentional to take into consideration children at both ends of the spectrum and to ensure equity for all children. We were just sitting in a meeting about implicit bias, and one of the things we learned is that taking more honors and AP courses are, I think, the number one thing that get you into college. So I'm confident that students in Avon are compelled and moved to take AP classes. I feel like it's almost all I hear about in my house and in the community. I hear about it all the time. So I'm anxious to learn more over the next month, and I look forward to understanding. I'm concerned about making any big decision on, for me, what would be anecdotal information of a few students at one meeting, so I need kind of to understand more. It would be helpful to me if we had those updates that Kathy was talking about to see how this impacts students across the board, how it's been, because I think that there's a chance we might see that some of the students that have been struggling, it's really impacted them in a positive way. So I would hate to be part of a system that doesn't support that change also. So I really need to know more. I think when Jay says that a 4 in the AP test should equal an A, I think that should be something that we consider as a policy.
It does. 4 in college prep.
4 in college. No, I'm talking about the test. We have some students taking tests, AP tests, who get a 4 or 5 on the test.
That's for college credit.
Right.
Right, but then they still get a C in the course.
They don't study for the test.
It's not a policy
That's how it
issue.
happens, yeah.
No, right, but if they've mastered the content to get a 4 or 5 on the AP exam, I think some districts have a policy that those kids, I've talked to teachers in other districts, those kids get, an A, because they have obviously mastered that content. So part of this might be a cultural problem that we're kind of needing to work through some of this with kind of what we believe as a district and what those how we have our grading impacts our kids at the AP level as well as the other end. So those are just some concerns I have. I'm not quite there yet. I really like the old system, and I'd like to learn more about the impact from students or on students across the spectrum before we have to vote next month.
Well, that's been the argument that different teachers in different sections of the same course may not grade the same result commensurately has been an ongoing issue for the board and a matter of great concern, and I understand administration is working on it, but it may be like the old joke about economists. The way you change an economist's mind is you let them die off and new people come on board. So you may not be able to get changes in faculty as to how they grade. But I would, at the risk of putting Mr. Mala on the spot, let me just ask this question. What sort of metrics would be available to report on this that could be done without overtaxing administration?
With all due respect, I'll have to get back to you. I'm not in a position to be able to respond to that as I'm sitting here. There's so many data points to look at.
And then I'd ask Mrs. Blea and Mrs. Zaroli, was there anything in particular that you had an interest in terms of a report back as to how it was working? Is there a series of data points that you were interested in?
The discussion that we held at the policy meeting, we had a series of questions. The dilemma that we are in is administration is at a disadvantage with not having a permanent principal. And the change that was made was done with from what I said specifically, looking at Mr. Tranberg, that I expected regular supports, supporting documentation as to how implementation was going. We have not been provided that. We will not be provided that. This is a challenge. So that is why we talked about simply reverting that one piece. Nothing else that was done that was, and again, also because there was not, and we've heard it from a couple people that were on the committee, there was not significant data points on this that were provided to the committee. So therefore, reverting back to something that when we don't have anything, it seems like a simple fix. If we can't answer the question as to what it improved. We are hearing it's not helpful. The last thing I want to do is hear that it's not helpful and then continue to watch those students be harmed.
But we might hear it's helpful to children.
I haven't heard that yet. I just haven't.
Is there a data point or series of things that would help you in your analysis?
That would help me to know. I would like to see how the students who are now who were in A, C classes are now in CP classes. How are they faring? What are their college opportunities going to be like under this new system?
Are you talking levels or GPA?
No,
This is GPA.
Right. I understand. What is that? How is that going to impact their GPA? Because while one student might not get into an elite school based on 0.01 of a GPA, we have another cohort of students who might not get into lots of colleges because of the GPA. So I just want to be fair. I want to really have a good grasp on what we're talking about, because I think that it has impact on us kids.
Mrs. Howard, I think you're up first, and
Well,
then we'll do Mrs. Young.
I just wanted a point of clarification, just because I can't remember, but within the past few years, didn't we already inflate our grades? The top A+ in advanced placement used to be a 5.0, and we raised everything to a 5.33.
We last, what are we talking about? Okay, so now I'm going to date myself. Before 2 years ago, the last time we revised the weighted average GPA calculation, which is what this is all about, was back in 2005. Andy was a freshman in high school, so I was pretty new to it all. At that point, we were still on the 7-point scale, that an A was a 7, back when Houston, and when it was from 5 to 7. When Houston was here, it was 4 to 7. What was happening then was the 7.0 got divided into a 4. We had, none of our students had above a 4.0. None. When I did a whole calculation, I did a whole comparison of showing Simsbury, schools around here, plus New Trier in Illinois, plus a couple other schools. We did scenarios of if these were your letter grades, what would your GPA be, and how it changed based on what these numbers were. And our students were at the bottom every single time. So we went at that time and went middle to a little bit above. We didn't go to the extremes, but we went so that our kids could get, and I don't recall if it was a 5.3 or whatever. We used 4, at that time it was a big discussion whether or not a college prep or an AC grade, A should be a 4.0. At that time, the college prep became a 4.0. That was an issue then because they were saying the kids in AC could not, with an A in AC, weren't going to get a 4.0. Now that we don't have AC anymore, the students that are in college prep get an A, they have a 4.0. So that's the baseline, and then everything else is above that. So to me now, I think if we keep that, I think keeping the 4.0 so that every child has the opportunity, no matter what level you're in, if you get an A, you at least have a 4.0. If you're in honors or AP/ECE, you get an A and you get the incremental difference. And I haven't looked at the big analysis lately, but based on what I've heard, the 0.67 is kind of in the middle between some schools that are at 0.5 and some that are 1.0. So we're not putting our kids at a disadvantage. We're giving them an advantage. And while most of the schools do recalculate when you apply to a University of Michigan, a University of Wisconsin, some of those other schools, they just take to start with, they take your GPA, your recorded GPA, and they do a break on that. So by being at only 0.33, we're hurting kids that want to get in, that want to apply to big schools.
They actually at those big schools? At those big schools, they actually recalculate.
After they make an initial cut, is the way I understand it. Now, I haven't been on it for a while.
That's what the student was told. There's an initial cut.
And then they redo the calculation. So we're disadvantaging some of not our top kids, because our top kids are probably okay, they make the cut. We're hurting the students that are in the middle to lower because they don't get the same increase they get an A or an A minus in their classes. They don't get the same credit for it as a student out of Glastonbury or Shorewood, Wisconsin, or Kansas, or whatever that they're competing with. We're not just competing with Simsbury and Glastonbury. We need to look bigger picture. So while having a 1-point differential would seem like it would benefit our kids the most, going back to 10 years ago, we decided that the 0.67 was good. From that, at that point, or since that time, I believe, and I think over the years we saw it, that more and more students got into better colleges. Whether or not it's hard to know what would have happened if we hadn't changed it. Maybe they still would have. Gut feeling is probably not. But to be at the lower end of the incremental, I think we're hurting all of our students, including our lowest level students. And I believe that we're here to help all of our students. And this doesn't hurt. By going back to where we were, I don't think we hurt anybody, and we help everybody. And I think that's what we're here to do.
Mrs. Young?
So I think the purpose in doing it to begin with was to create a more equal and level playing field on both ends of the spectrum. And if we don't have a principal who's been there long enough to have some of this history and understanding the way my colleague here does, perhaps somebody from guidance could come in and speak to us and give their perspective on this, since I would think they'd be most closely associated with those who are affected by it at all levels.
Mr. Chairman, we'll organize a presentation that we will provide in advance of the next meeting, but it will take place here at your next regular meeting. And we know who we should call upon to put the information together. That's what we do for you. So we're going to look at all data points that are possible.
Would they be able to provide something to policy?
I'll, as soon as we have an opportunity to, sketch out what the project plan is, we'll make you aware of what that is.
So, can I make a motion? To,
It's not intended to be moved.
motion.
no. My motion is to actually table this first read until it's been reworked.
Timing,
Don't-
timing is an issue.
I don't think we have a position to table a first read, because first read, we don't take any action on.
Okay, so we're just not doing, okay.
Right.
Okay.
Nothing happens, it just appears on the agenda. Normally, we won't even discuss it, but I thought in light of the issues involved, I wanted to
Okay.
get the discussion going so that everybody would know, which is unusual, and I apologize for that.
Someone in the audience had a comment.
Usually we don't take comments until towards the end, sorry. I think you had one more item to go.
Yes.
Mr.
Then
Homebound Hospital.
page 108, the next first read would be the homebound and hospital instruction. So there are a couple of edits that were made. And I have not received any comments on this, but I welcome any and all comments. So just wanted to let you know that that's the end of the first reads, and looking forward to, we'll discuss it again at the next policy meeting, and then again for next meeting, Board of Ed meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Zaroli. The next, oh yes, Mrs.
I'd like to ask that we just take a break so we can have our photo taken, so the students don't have to stay.
Aha, okay, well, we can do that, if it be the will of the board. I figured it would encourage the student to be here on time next time. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
No, just to go into, we're not adjourning.
Why don't you just go out right out in the hall?
Go right out in the hall?
Go right in the
Yeah, we'll just go out
hall.
right in the hall.
And you
But
can
I just wanna
stand
make sure
against
it's
the
will
wall.
of the full board. Is everybody on board with this? Yes, okay. All right. All right, we're back in session. Is our cameraman ready? Yes, excellent, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is a new item, and I call it Chair's Ruminations, and people have objected to that. This business is not intended to be the subject of any motions, but is intended to be an opportunity for a board to have a short discussion on the topics indicated. Because I want to see if I can start heading us off in a particular direction. And the first item was long-term projects and goals. And I was going to throw it open to anybody. I put down two of my pet programs in case anybody was short of ideas, in which case I'll throw them out. One is, I think it'd be nice to have some programs for the gifted, possible use of the virtual high school as low-hanging fruit towards enriching curriculum for gifted people. We don't have anything special for that. And the next item I had is sort of a very far distant goal, is an academy model. And I was wondering if I could get Mr. Mala to comment briefly on what an academy model is, because I'm sure I will butcher it.
No, actually, that's twice tonight you caught me flat-footed. It must be that kind of evening. An academy,
Fine, you recover
an
well.
academy model is a school within a school model. And I'll use something very specific. If a student has interest and aptitude in engineering, you actually create an engineering school that operates within the confines of Avon High School. That's in its very simple terms. Of course, many districts have academy models that are, the arts and sciences. They appeal to that group. We would have to make some decisions. Obviously, it affects staffing, it affects program studies, what courses you offer. But if you do a quick Google on it, you'll get the literal definition, but that's in layman's terms exactly what it is. It appeals to students' interest and aptitude rather than confining them to a traditional high school, competitive high school curriculum. I don't believe we'll have the capacity to ever become truly a comprehensive high school. You may remember those, and I'm going to use some bad terminology. You had a wing off one side, it had all shops in it because students went into the vocational trades. That seems to be a thing of the past with respect to how this building was designed and even with the additions to it. It doesn't preclude us from creating an academy model by using other satellite facilities also. So I've seen schools do that. They'll share another school's wing, or they'll offer programming, and not computer programming, but general programming with surrounding high schools that have the same concept. Many schools across the country have been built physically with the academy model in place. Some of our crack magnet schools are like that. The thematic nature of the magnet school makes really the whole school an academy, and many of them have academy in their name. So
it's intended to be a smaller school within a school, offering, at least my intention was to offer more individualized instruction for my thought was gifted/interested. So those were two things I was thinking of. I understand that it may not be entirely possible, but I wanted to ask, what do you guys want?
I will ask one thing before the other board members share their ideas, that you don't ask me to calculate using a standard deviation like you did to one of our presenters. Thank you.
No one else has any idea?
I do. I have some pie in the sky
Go ahead.
ideas.
Go ahead.
So
talk.
we're just putting these out there with no expectation that our
Right.
poor
I
administration
didn't
will
ask
have
them
to
ahead of
vote.
time.
This is just a
put
discussion
this
about
is
like
a
crazy
discussion.
ideas
This is
and what you'd like to
brainstorming.
see.
Go get the defibrillator and put it right here.
That's why I clarified this, because I don't want
I
to
got it. Yeah.
I don't want any
good
excitement
to
tonight. One of the things that I thought was really interesting that I learned on that committee that we served on was the idea of maker spaces in schools and buildings. And I heard that Farmington Elementary Schools, I do not know if any of this is factual. This is all information that I've heard from other people. But they have some great maker spaces that some of their elementary kids really enjoy, like Legos and whatever else is like safe and, glue and whatever. I
don't
thought
know
that
what a
would be
maker space is. Could you tell
a
me?
maker space, to the best of my understanding, would be something, we actually saw videos of them in high schools.
Right.
And it would be a room like this that would be cleared out, kind of just with
Stations.
craft tables almost.
Stations.
Stations, and they would just kind of have tools and materials. At the one school that we saw they would put kids in pods, and you'd have to kind of create something using different, it was like a differentiated instruction kind of idea where the really artistic kids would do the artwork on the clock, and the really kind of techie kids would do the work on the insides, and they'd use materials that they had in this makerspace room. There was just nothing but kind of free learning. There was no, what do you call it? No boundaries. There was no grade. It was right. It was, you were trying to just kind of create a project.
Creativity.
And it was really neat, the things that we saw that they ended up coming up with.
Well, Jackie, I'll make your evening. We actually sent one administrator and all of our library media specialists to a training on maker spaces, because this is something that has come up, through different venues of a place to explore. So we have actually started that exploration to see what does it look like, how might we phase it in, how might we use it to set up stations, where students could go from a classroom and create, kind of maybe with a few parameters that are hooked to, some of the curriculum work that they're working on. So that is an area that we are currently exploring.
At what school level?
Every
K-12.
K-12, and it's actually, we're calling it the transformation of our library media centers into maker spaces. and I'm not suggesting that, that there's anything wrong with our library media centers, but they should be the heart of all of our schools. So we have to become more progressive in our thinking, so that's a good one.
And it's kind of a way to get home ec sewing and shop and stuff back into having kids at least exposed to it. A potential way.
Mrs. Zaroli?
I know that I have a friend who teaches at Infield, and she's doing via a Lego grant.
Yeah.
She's doing Lego through their elementary schools, and it's just been phenomenal. And it's you want to call barrier breaker. There's just no barriers with every student, and it's phenomenal. And Lego trains her. There is curriculum, but the kids certainly aren't knowing that there's curriculum, so they're having a great time.
Laura?
Thank you. Laura?
Well, along those lines, the media center needs are changing and evolving. When I had children here at the high school, we gave, the PTO that is, gave a grant to help revamp the library here, and I'm wondering if there's any way to explore grants for other ways of improving and supporting our libraries, K through 12, because I do think that they are an important and valuable resource at every level.
Okay. Mrs. Shute, I can see you're reaching.
I'm in agreement with Houston. I would love to see something for the gifted and talented identified students, because the families receive those letters and they're excited, and then they're like, now what? So I would like to see us do something. I know that Thompson Brook has these clusters. Would you speak to that a little bit?
The gifted and talented has really moved from that pull-out to enrichment for all, and we are piloting that at Thompson Brook this year, and we're getting ready to launch it at the elementaries at the end of the year in terms of training the teachers. So, and I know Jay was just over there as a guest presenter to one of the groups today, was it Jay?
Yes, in the stock market.
In the stock market club. So we spent a year with teachers training them as to these Tier 1 activities that they do with the students, and it's based on student interest. The students run the groups that they sign up for, so we had teachers identify what they were interested in, facilitating with students, what students were interested in. They chose 3 different activities they wanted to do, and they got one of their 3. So that has been running incredibly well. The first day the kids were so excited, the teachers were very anxious. But now I think they're both on about the same plane, because it's just a whole new way of learning for the kids. So we'll continue to build on that model.
Yeah, it's great. When you walk into Thompson Brook, you can see the murals that are being formed on the walls, and I didn't know what was happening. I said, oh, this is cool. What's happening? My daughter said, oh, that's one of the clusters.
Right.
So it's amazing to see that it's touching the building, and the kids are involved, so I think it's important that we know this great stuff that you're doing. So, thank you.
Anyone else with some thoughts? And turns out we're further down on the line than we thought. Mrs. Blaine?
I don't want to take everybody else's
No.
ideas. Go ahead. One of the things that I would want to do, and I'm sure, I would like to learn more about if we have disparity in outcomes between genders, between rich versus poor, between, is there a racial disparity? I guess I'd want to know if we did have that, and if we did, how can the board support closing those gaps? And that would be something that I would be really interested in understanding. If it exists, maybe it doesn't, that would be really great. We should call a paper. But if it does, how can we kind of work towards closing that gap?
And we've worked on that quite a bit over the last few years in terms of, common assessments, our universal screenings that we have put in place, K-8, and we moved them into the high school this year. Again, everything can always be better, but we have started that. All of our students now we collect data on 3 times a year through the universal screenings. We look at the benchmark data. That is all moved into Power School now at the elementary. It was never housed in any one place. We're just at the teacher level. We review that after every administration at the central office, the principals and teachers, so that we are seeing any students or groups of students that have gaps, so to speak, or need some extra support in areas. So that's an area we have been working heavily on. Like I said, it's a work in progress. We get better and better at it, but that is something. So we're not really looking at subgroups or, it's just individual children and what they need.
And one of the interesting thing about students is that there are really different kinds of intelligences. I'm terrible at foreign languages, but I'm good in logic and manipulation and speech. Some people are mathematically gifted. All right, well, there you go. It's true. But different people learn in different ways. So if we have a way that we can, not necessarily completely customize, but try and reach down to different people with different environments to help them achieve more of their potential, I think that's kind of cool. And actually, I like the fact that we're sitting here discussing stuff about where we can go and what we can improve things. Because that's not something we do often enough. Anyone else? Mrs. Zaroli, did you want to add something? Yeah, you got, see?
A little bit.
I could read her mind.
The virtual high school, has been my passion for years. I feel it is just barely used and has such explosive potential. I'd really like it to be available for all. I don't want to say I hate mandates, so I won't say I think it should be required, but I kind of do. Because I think exposure to a virtual class for everybody to have it out of the way in high school would be something that then when they go to college or work, that they've already got it behind them. And I really, really, really would love a hip hop class because I think that would cross-cut barriers, and I mean, it's too late for my son, but trust me, he would have been all over that.
See, that's the advantage with able to brainstorm a little bit. We've used a lot of the virtual high school for credit recovery and things like that, but the advantage is particularly for the gifted kids, if you want to take a course in ancient Greek, if it's available on virtual high school, and I think it is, you can do that. So anyone else? Mrs. Howard, do you want to add something?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess I would just pose the
Mr.
question
Burke?
to our thought leaders, our administration, because I'm sure they live and breathe it all day long and they're on the cutting edge. Are there some pie in the sky ideas that you guys have been kicking around with your staff that you want the board to be aware of?
Well, we'll certainly translate that onto paper. We are your dreamers, frankly, and we have to anticipate what you're dreaming about and what our parents are dreaming about for their children. So, I mean, many of the things that have already been stated are already in motion, so we're sitting here feeling very good about that. And we certainly will be more specific with you in the near future. It kind of ties with one of our agenda items that was put on mine.
Okay. Then the next time I had is communications with the board. Gary and I had a little bit of a chat, and I suggested maybe we cut down a little bit by eliminating what I called lesser important things, although to the people involved, maybe not, such as complaints about calling snow days and attendance reports. And Gary said, well, I promised you I would keep you fully informed. And I said, you did, but it's hurting. There's so many emails. My electrons are getting tired. And he cut back a bit this weekend, and I just wanted to say that we noticed and thank you. And I just wanted to make sure everybody on the board was in line with this, because I don't want to do something unilaterally.
What are you doing?
Well, I just said cut down on the amount of emails, and he's cutting down on the amount of emails and.
On weather and attendance.
Right. Although I actually like.
Well, I do want to speak to this, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Those of you that were on the board that when you hired me, I believe my response to the question, what type of information would you communicate to the Board of Education? I believe my response was
everything.
Everything that legally I could share with you. And I'd rather be criticized for over-communicating than not communicating enough. The attendance, I brought that forth because many of you told me you had concerns about attendance and what was this administration doing about it. So we responded by sharing it with you. I believe we were asked to disaggregate out the number of days that were professional development and what the cost of those were. And, how many of those are sick days or vacation days and such. And how does that correlate directly with our substitute teacher line item? So I was simply being responsive. The weather, if you don't want the weather, I won't send it to you.
We actually like the weather.
They're
We
calling,
like the weather.
some of the reason that I send you emails when people are less than complimentary about some of the difficult decisions that are inherent in the work that I do every day is because I know they're speaking to you, and I know you're speaking to them. So I'd rather have you have all the information than be left wondering, what's he doing? Is he completely crazy on this snow day? Yeah, and the Friday was a bad call because the sun came out, but the whole state closed.
And
But
also
I mean it. I'm trying to be somewhat witty, but there's always a conscious reason behind me sending you a message. Just so you know that. I respectfully accepted what Houston shared, and I will, I'll be more aware. But I don't have any other way to I have no way to gauge, other than someday you'll sit at the table and say, I'm not communicating enough. How come you didn't tell us about that? So, that's just the nature of the work. So I get it, and bear in mind I'm the one who's sending it. So if you just do the math on, how long it takes to send them and the kinds of hours that are, spent doing it, it's to keep you informed.
Well, we understand, but we also recognize that it takes a fair bit of time away from you, and when you're sending us an email at midnight, maybe you should have some personal time too. All right.
Can I say something publicly? I just want to say, I really feel for Gary with these snow days and these delays, and I think you have the full support of the board. I don't want to speak for everybody. I know I can't do that, but I really think that you go to all ends to make sure that you are making the very best call, and I think it's really hard to be a superintendent in the day and age of email and Facebook when people can kind of make whatever errant comment they want, and I just really want the public to know that we are all really, again, I don't want to speak for everybody, confident in that you're taking that responsibility seriously, and you're considering your staff, and people have to drive from far, and people who live on the mountain, it's icy, and there's a million different things that I think people aren't considering, and I think that's a tough job.
And I thank you and those among you that might feel the same way.
All right. The ruminations didn't hurt too much, and it took about 15 minutes. All right. Superintendent's update.
Page 11 is the enrollment report. You'll notice that we have a slight uptick, actually 10 more students enrolled from this time last month. You could see our trend continues to be flat and in an upward direction. I have no crystal ball with respect to kindergarten registration. We will now begin to look at that on a weekly basis. Obviously, that is one of our biggest areas of concern. Just a reminder, when you're sitting in your chair, it's very similar to sitting in mine. There's two numbers that you look at, the number that are graduating and the number that are coming in kindergarten, and that's how you can pick up trend data. We will not decline according to the national demographers' percentages. It's not going to happen, at least not here, and for all the right reasons. So it's a good problem to have, but I'll keep you posted about kindergarten. Correspondence, page 113 is the key in your packet. Going out on a limb for our two student representatives and saying that the last official day of school for this school year will be June 20th.
Uh-oh, she doesn't look happy.
That's the best I could do. I got to get 180. And the last staff day, as we're sitting here, is June the 21st. So let's pray.
Refresh our recollection as to how that works.
There's no built-in days. That's a fictitious thing. How many days do you build in?
No. April 1st, we pick the final end date.
Right.
Sometime after April 1st.
You have to vote.
Once we do that, then that's locked in. even if flood, pestilence, whatever, and we cut down?
For graduation only.
Graduation,
only.
we have to lock graduation.
That's why I didn't have it done, okay.
And then, that in turn locks project graduation, which then locks the middle school.
Which then truly locks that they're not coming back, so it locks in the last.
Well, you know, and I had tremendous pressure this year because you say, oh, come on, let's end on a Friday when I closed. So. Status of the high school principal search, you may have seen the notifications that went out. There's also a survey that's been distributed. This is in accordance with the established search and selection process that was put in place by this administration. The initial, the Survey Monkey is due on, was due. Yes, it was due, but we leave it open until we actually, within hours before a meeting with the organizational meeting for the Search and Selection Committee.
Is there a cutoff date for the principal search?
Yes, I'm about to go there.
Oh.
I'll be more than happy to send you this timeline. I just want to caution you, in the new spirit of not trying to kill you with emails, this will be subject to change, the dates. So we actually have the initial committee organizational meeting on Tuesday the 28th at 3 p.m. And your representatives are Jay and Laura. And then we expanded this committee a little bit. We have 3 support staff, 4 parents, 4 teachers, 2 members of the board, 1 building level leader from another building other than the high school. That's in addition, 2 students, and then members of the central administration. And as you know, it's a very comprehensive process. The first round of interviews are slated for Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday being April 4, Thursday being April 6. Then we have to hurdle the April vacation that we really wanted in March. That's just an editorial comment. To go back to the legislature.
Gave us 3 days off.
Yeah, and the round 2 interviews are on the 25th and 26th, and then we progress from there. We do a reverse site visit. They come here. We move them through large groups of folks. And I won't bore you with the details, but I'll let you read this. Our goal is by the first week of May.
Actually, my question was the application cutoff date. So that's
It's still actually open.
until when?
We're closing it on March 28th.
Okay. And do we know how many applications are
28.
up to date? Okay.
28. So we had it open, we closed it, we reopened it. It actually drew more candidates.
Okay.
It has to do with the time of the year. We're in the prime months of hiring in public schools now. So we did not have a satisfactory, at least what we thought, satisfactory applicant pool. We have 28 now. So stand by for details. I'm going to defer the next D item to my esteemed Assistant Superintendent.
In terms of the notification to parents about the study skills, the change from Learning Center to study skills, we have 4 families left to contact, was what I was told by the high school administration. And then we will be meeting with them the first week of April just to follow up and close that out.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
Budget update. Moving on to F, district mission statement.
Well, we should, in all honesty, throw a little bit about the update.
And this is really for the viewing audience and those that have tolerated our entertainment this evening. This budget process that we're in the middle of is unlike anything I've seen as a professional. I don't know any person in public education or in local elected positions in any city or town in this state could make sense out of what's occurring. As you can see, those important emails that I forward, I'm getting a different number, literally on a weekly basis. And I'm getting a different number coming from the town, which I can't do anything. And just so you understand, there's a high level of anxiety in the district. We've been out, we've had conversations, people are wondering, are we going to have to cut more? But when I get variances from, okay, it's 225,000 to 441,000 in the matter of a 24-hour period, it's like hitting a moving target, and that's locally. So the decision really needs to be made locally, because we're not going to have any information from the state level. I said this to you before, I've said it to every audience that I've had to address with respect to trying to make sense out of this. I don't see this legislature having a budget in place until October. I'm not privy to all the conversations by the other elected boards, but I am feeling enormous anxiety to deliver a number to you, which we all have to discuss and then you have to feel comfortable with, that requires more reductions than you already have approved in the proposed budget. And I'll just remind you, it's 21 and a half positions. The Hartford Current didn't get 22 and a half, sorry. The Hartford Current put 20. It's actually higher than that. And there was a massive article, quoting every district. So yeah, that's just a long way to say I have no idea what the number is, but I also bear the responsibility, along with this team, to make the decisions, to bring you something that is responsible in the face of the unknown. Sounds like double talk, but I've never ever have seen a process like this.
Is Brandon going to engage you before the April 3rd hearing?
I'm reaching out to him. I do know he was not available today to speak to. I'll be talking to him very early tomorrow morning and saying, where are we going? I would think that, the chairs of the committees are having conversations by now. We're like 2 weeks away from having to do a presentation to the residents of Avon with respect to the percentage increase of the Avon Public Schools operating budget. And then Mark Zacchio will do the presentation of the budget in the aggregate for the town of Avon. And I'm not sure, the town council is meeting tonight, and they have another meeting scheduled, and I just don't know the date. And I plan on going to that one, obviously, I'm here. It's very significant, and I don't want to belabor it, but people are anxious. You can't just reduce a position and say, okay, we're going to do without that. We have labor agreements that we have to adhere to. We're talking bumping scenarios. The person might have the right to occupy a position that they've never taught in Avon just by virtue of having the license.
But they have to be qualified.
Right. They have to be licensed. So you can't just do it in 2 days. We have to follow through every single reduction. And I'm given the number that was transmitted to me last, I don't know if I could do that. 441,000 more on top of what we've already reduced. We'll put our reductions from what was proposed somewhere near the $2.9 million range. And that's without including any of the teacher retirement fund shift to the responsibility shift to the communities. So unfortunately, I think we might be together very soon, as soon as we have a number.
Mr. Muller, what happens April 3?
Monday, April 3rd is the budget hearing. The budget hearing is open to any resident, town of Avon. I can't remember who actually started. Actually, the town council chairman, Mark Zacchio, will welcome folks. And then
Board of Finance.
I'm sorry, does he do it?
Harrison.
Oh, that's right, the bell. I forgot. It's the bell. I'm confused. Then Mr. Zacchio usually presents first, and then you'll have to decide if you want me to continue to present your budget. I would generally go in the middle, and then the Board of Finance chair goes at the end to discuss the impact of the first two presentations on the community. Just bear in mind, there's a huge revenue loss here. Our governor's proposed budget zeroes out all the lines. Our legislators continue to say that, oh no, that's really not going to happen, that's not going to happen. But bear in mind, we are in a state that has a revenue problem. You could do anything you want to the expenditure side of the budget. If you don't have the money to pay for those lines, they're not going to fly. And you can see it's all wealth-based driven, and that whole, ability to pay argument is in. We rank number 12 in Connecticut as losing the most amount of money. The 11 in front of us, from 11 to 1, start at Trumbull and they go south. So we're in a very unique club. I hope it all doesn't happen, but I don't know if we have an option to say, well, we can't give you a number because we don't know what number we're working with. And that may be a conversation that's way out of my responsibility, but we want to deliver something, but that's where we are.
Thank you, and certainly any residents are certainly welcome to attend the April 3 meeting. Do you remember the time and place, Gary?
It's 7 o'clock at the senior center.
7 o'clock at the senior center.
And there'll be notifications that the town will send out on that. The item that you agreed to add at the beginning was district mission statement. I'm assuming that means the strategic plan as well, because the mission statement's the key component to that. I guess I'm looking to the board to see what your pleasure is. You will remember, beginning of my tenure, there wasn't a strategic plan. There wasn't a process to develop a strategic plan. We did something unprecedented. We had a variety of different representatives in the community that had never been in the same room together before. And we came out with a really great product because of all the energy and discussions in and among that same group of people. When we went into that project, we were very clear to say we want to create a document that will withstand the test of time. Now, strategic plans are great, but if you approach it, we use the hybrid Cambridge model. If you want to know, you could go search the Cambridge group and you'll actually see the process. We did a hybrid, and the hybrid portion was not identifying specific tasks or priorities. We do that together every year, or we should be doing that every year. So it's very global in nature. So when you read that, the belief statements are the convictions that that group of people said that this community wants for their children, who ultimately become students. Thank you. I'm looking at it. So I guess the question is, do you want to do an abbreviated version of that model, which we could organize? We'll go back and get representatives of those same groups. Some people have moved on in the community, but we certainly will. And then perhaps we use, a day to review what we have and discuss any changes that you would want to see. Ultimately, it's the Board of Education strategic plan. So there's two ways you could go. Bring the full group back together, look at it for a day, or we have a session that we have the conversation. If I were to recommend, I have a funny feeling I'm going to be asked that, so I'm going to head that one off.
Yeah, well,
I would go with the first process.
Let me just sort of tell you where I'm coming from, which is probably a complete surprise to everybody. We could sit as a Board of Education and use a word processor and slice and dice and chop and fix the thing so that it's ready. Maybe we'll just change the date. But I think the more important part, you never know. The more important part is to get buy-in from other people and from the constituent bodies. So it's not necessarily the final product, although the final product is certainly important. But I think it's the process that you go through to get there, to get people to buy in, to see if there are new ideas, to incorporate the new ideas, to run through the whole thing. That's where I'm sort of leaning, and you sort of stole my thunder and said you were sort of leaning in that direction too, but I have no idea what the board wants, which is why I wanted to have this as a discussion item, than just simply say, go do report back. Mrs. Howard.
So I was on the original committee that came up with the strategic plan, and I agree that there should be some community buy-in. I'm not sure if we want the same people there, but
Some are gone.
some are gone. But
It would be impossible
to almost look at it as a living document and just sort of update it. And I don't think it's, I mean, we spent a lot of time the first time around, and so I think that we don't need to spend that much time revising, but buy-in is good too.
You want a balanced approach.
Mrs. Young?
So I would hope that our esteemed student representatives would be invited to participate in any sort of strategic planning update, because their input to this committee and to the community at large is incredibly valuable, and their time is important, and their ideas are important, and I believe one of you is graduating. Right? So
There it goes.
this might be your last opportunity.
Well, we haven't certified him for
All right.
graduation yet, but that
One of you
plan.
will be here for at least another year, I believe, so I would hope that we would include student input and especially invite these two.
We always include students in our work.
Everything.
That's just a given.
Yeah.
They come first, and it goes beyond our student representatives to the board also, because they do a great job at representing a certain percentage of our enrollment, but it's impossible for them perhaps to speak for middle schoolers and elementary youngsters.
Can I ask about timing?
I can't answer that because we have to go back and look at all of our calendars, and once you come to consensus on the approach, then we'll plan that out, run that by you in a project type schedule. Again, I agree that I don't think you're going to need a long session to do this. I don't think you're going to need multiple sessions to do it. That's just my hunch. So.
Okay, I think I can say, unless someone cares to contradict me, that it sounds like we're in agreement to do something that has some buy-in from our constituencies. All right.
Oh, I was just.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think maybe 2 sessions or something. I think trying to do it in one doesn't give the community people enough time to get the background and be able to share ideas. That it doesn't have to be the 4 or 5, whatever we did last time. It was a long time.
It was long.
It was good.
There's another way to do that, accomplish that, and the core group comes up with whatever revisions they want or edit, and then you send us as your agents to meet with different groups in the community and say, this is something that's being considered, and we could gather that information and bring it back to you.
That sounds like a lot of work for you.
I'd say, why don't you come up with a project plan and
Yeah.
do it next time?
That sounds more top-down than I think we would like it to be.
Whatever you want.
Okay. Dr. Russick.
Okay. On page 137 is a copy of the Smarter Balanced Assessment Parent Letter that will be distributed shortly. This is just kind of an FYI. And I also want to spend a couple of minutes just doing a quick update on a few things that we're working on. As you recall, we did an overview, a draft of the student support model to talk about how we're supporting students and really look at, do we have something systematic in place, and how do we fine-tune that, to Kathy's point earlier this evening. So we have established 3 different groups comprised of general ed teachers, special ed teachers, and administrators. One group is reading, writing, one's looking at math, and one's looking at executive functioning or study skills. We've also decided to broaden it a little bit, and we've included some representation from the middle school because we think it's important that we have that vertical articulation, 7-12, in terms of the supports, especially with middle school only being 2 years. How do we ensure our students are supported 7-12 and we don't lose a few in that 8-9 transition? So the conversations we've had so far have been very rich, especially across the 7-12 piece. So when the groups come together, we've met with 2 of the 3. The third one we'll meet with this week. We ask them, what are the current supports? It's just kind of an inventory of what we have in place. And then what are the ideal supports? What's missing on our infamous whiteboard down there that you would like to see? So then we take all of that information and we're creating a continuum of support. So it starts with the Tier 1 core instruction, what's happening in that classroom, and Tier 1 interventions. What are teachers doing within the classrooms, but what services can students access outside of the classroom, during a study hall or something like that. Then we have our Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, and they become more intense as they move up. For each support that we've identified, we're defining it with a purpose, a description, what, where, when, the frequency. Entrance and exit benchmark, what is the criteria for getting into the support and out of the support once you've mastered the gap that we're trying to fill? Who is the best, most highly qualified service provider to perform and provide that support to our students? Are there any structural needs we need to put in place, any professional development? And then for a couple of these, they will be credit bearing, so we'll be creating the curriculum for those specific courses. Obviously, the work is in the beginning stages right now, but once we have completed that and we're on the fast track, we'll provide you with a more detailed presentation probably in May. That's our goal, to have it in place by then. The group will also make recommendations because when Kim and I shared the draft student support model, that was our best thinking at the time, but that's just our thinking. And again, we have many people at the table now with much broader thoughts and ideas, so that may be revamped a little bit when it comes back. Another thing that we're working on is the capstone project here for the high school. As you recall, this is the last year for the human rights course and the SSP, so we're putting the capstone in place. The coordinators and administrators have been working, and I have been facilitating that work to define what is the capstone going to look like. So we have that drafted out, and they met with groups of staff to share what the plan was to collect their feedback, and they met with groups of students, 9-12, to get their feedback on the draft. Then, of course, it had to snow last week, so we're on makeup this week, but our next step is to create the rubrics and the handbooks that we will then distribute out and start sharing with students, families, and obviously we'll be doing a presentation for you. When the group comes together to work, we have faculty working on the rubrics and the handbooks, but we also have included students. So this is the first work that we're actually having faculty and students creating the end products together. So that's very exciting. We'll be doing that later this week, and then we'll bring that to you to share with you what our capstone will look like moving forward. The next area that we're working on is the AEMAT committee, because we love those acronyms. It's Accessible Educational Materials and Assistive Technology. There was some money at the State Department level to fund some technical assistance to districts for work in this area. So we were offered the funds and we graciously accepted that opportunity. So we have assembled a committee of K-12 general education teachers, special ed teachers, members of our tech department to work with representatives from the Special Education Resource Center to really examine and enhance our practices in this area. So we'll be having 3 meetings between now and the end of the year. Of course, the first one was snowed out too, so that has been rescheduled. But the exciting thing for me is when we look at accessible educational materials and assistive technology, it's usually through special ed, but we have both general ed and special ed teachers at the table so that, again, those Tier 1 core instruction and support at the classroom level, we can use those same strategies for all students. So that's very exciting, at least in my book, as we start moving that work forward.
How much money was that?
It's just we get the person. or a couple of people.
Oh, a person, okay.
Yeah, 2 folks, I'm sorry.
So someone to train.
Someone to train and facilitate our work for 3 days.
Okay,
Mhm.
I gotcha.
Kim has some great connections, so we capitalize on those.
I thought it was actually the technology and materials, so, okay.
No, it's the
Okay.
training in them.
Okay, I got it.
And then finally, another committee that we have started is the General Education Software Committee. Earlier this year, with the enactment of the new Student Data Privacy Act, we collected and compiled all of the information for the software that we're currently using in the district. There were over 900 softwares that were reported as being used, and I'm sure there might be a few more that weren't on that sheet. So we took out the duplicates and we've narrowed it down to just under 500. With that said, we have a K-12 a small committee that will be convening in April on the 3rd to create that rubric of how to review the software, and then we're going to review what we currently have and make some recommendations really as a district to look at what is the best software and how do we narrow that scope down. Because I believe some of the softwares we're using, weren't aligned necessarily with the curriculum. They look good, so we want to start weeding that out and really focus on a few that are strong that we use, again, across all grades with all of our students. Ultimately, all of the software and programs that are approved will be compiled and we'll list those on the district website. So they'll be available to everyone to know what we have, staff and families. And then the work of CPDC, the Curriculum Professional Development Council, last month, they finalized a software proposal form, and we have that out piloting it for the remainder of the year, because previously folks could just, kind of look at some software and put it into the classroom. So as we did with our primary instructional materials, we've now created a approval process for all the software programs that we're looking at. And that concludes my report, unless you have some questions.
Thank you. Questions? All right, Mrs. Aroli.
Just relative to policy, that there are a couple of policies that will be coming forward from that, because there were legislative changes that affect student privacy laws. So we want to make sure we're following those exactly, but we needed to get a grapple on what's going on with software.
Thanks. All right, Kim Meerman.
Thank you. Mine will be very brief tonight. Just kind of wanted to update you because I know I had mentioned to you early on in the year that we were looking at 504 Direct, which is compatible with IP Direct. It is an electronic database that allows us to catalog information around students who need accommodations through Section 504. Currently, we use a paper process for the most part, and so this will allow us to have a system that can be more universal across the district and allow us to catalog that more electronically. We're piloting the process right now, and as with any pilot, we're learning all the bumps and the issues that we may be coming across as we're implementing it, and our hope is that we'll go with full implementation in the fall. So we're really working through that process right now, and we're trying it at different levels. Elementary and high school have been really our first entree into it, but we're going to start also with the other schools just to kind of see how it works as a system. And the second is just to prove the collaboration between Donna and I. We put basically the same information in our monthly reports. And I just want to elaborate. She did a beautiful job, so I don't need to elaborate on much, but I just want to elaborate on that piece. The fact that we are building a system that is collaborative between general ed and special ed. And it really is an important vision, I think, for us as a district to really follow through on. And what we're creating is a system that is really designed to support the needs of all students. And of course, we're always going to protect the legal protections for students under IEPs as well as Section 504. That's always a forefront critical aspect. But the way we implement those practices are really more universal in how we support and reach all students, including students without disabilities who may need extra support. So I just want to publicly acknowledge the collaboration that is occurring between general ed and special ed and how powerful that is for me to come into a district that embraces that, because that has always been my longstanding professional goal and vision. And so it's really nice to see that coming to life.
Thank you. Questions? All right. No questions. Other and further business. Communications from board members. Yes, Mr. Shute.
I would just like to make a plug for Thompson Brook. They are going to be performing Mulan Jr., the musical, next weekend. So come out and support. It's a great way for the community to get together and enjoy each other. It's March 31st and April 1st at 7:30, and then on Sunday, April 2nd is a 2 p.m. matinee. You can reach out to Thompson Brook if you would like to reserve tickets.
All right, support local theater.
Is there a specific person at the school?
Well, there is a parent that's handling it, so it's just all checks and things go to Thompson Brook PTO, and then it gets sent to a mom.
Because we received some calls in my office, and I said, just go ahead and call Thompson Brook, they'll take your name, and somebody will get back.
I'm sure Cindy or Kelly would do that, yes.
All right, committee reports, Alternative Resources, Regional Services, Mr. Spivak.
Yes, in our last meeting, we actually touched on a lot of different subjects, but our main focus is still the computer science for all, and looking at grants in that direction, and many of the grants probably will go towards training. I can list off some of the other topics. I think the administration at some point can give us more detail, but we discussed the Jane Doe No More Foundation. I'm going to use Donna's abbreviation, AEMET, which she just explained to you all. Discussed how, I think it was Connor explained how the Friends Group brought Mohegan Sun, and you know, a lot of these examples are things that are no cost to the district, and having either people in the community or outside, you know, resources help provide to our students. One of those other examples is our Director of Security, and also we discussed the EduTech. So.
Excellent, thank you. And when's your next meeting?
Next meeting is May 3rd.
May 3rd, thank you. Audit?
So at our last meeting, we discussed the letter from Bloom Shapiro, which is in the process of being revised, and Ms. Michaud is working with the town side to obtain a copy of that letter once the town receives it themselves. So thank you for your hard work on that.
Excellent, thank you. Capital budget, Mr. Burke?
Nice and easy, we did not meet, and there are no future plans to meet.
Being that we have no money, but we said.
Excellent, thank you. Communications, school climate, Mrs. Blea, Mrs. Howard.
I think we actually reported out, because of the way that the meetings worked out last time. Our next meeting is Monday, March 28th in Hartford. But I did want to provide a brief update that Gary had sent some things that he's following up with for the open choice program. I think it's March 29th.
Public information session.
Right. March 29th is our meeting.
I sent you two things today.
Right.
And one was a draft presentation to use at the second public information session.
And is that the 29th?
I just can't remember it's next week, actually.
So are we doing
next
it?
Wednesday, yes.
The 29th is the Wednesday.
Yeah. And that was the presentation that the committee wanted to have done with respect to the Hartford Open Choice Program and how that all works. So you have a draft of it, and it's a massive document. So again, in capital letters, I said it did not go through final edits yet. So.
And what location is that? Library?
We're actually going to the senior center.
Kathy,
We will send the notice out tomorrow, beginning tomorrow.
you all meet on Monday,
Monday.
March 27th.
I wrote 28th. Is
That's
it
a Tuesday.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
I had that I just don't want to edit the minutes.
It's Monday the 27th.
Yeah. And
What time?
5:30. That was 5:30.
I'll have to get back and double check. I thought, yeah, 27. Sorry about
It's
that.
actually
And let me just make sure I have it correctly. For board consideration, your committee thought an explanation of the Chef versus O'Neill to the district would be a good thing, and how would you propose that be done?
I think that is part of what Gary is talking about in this public information session. I think we're also kicking around the idea, I don't want to get ahead of any commitments, but I think Simsbury had a really interesting video on their website. We had met with some people and some kids in the district who a lot of people weren't clear on what Chef was and what the settlement really represented and why we even have desegregated schools. Simsbury had done a sit-down interview with a facilitator and some in-district and out-of-district kids. And it was a really neat thing that you can kind of email this link of this great interview to it was easy to disseminate, so we,
Or have
shared
it on
that
the
thought with
website.
Gary. Yeah, or
And
put it
I
on the
think
website.
Mr.
or
Mulla
whatever.
had raised an issue with someone on the staff as to whether or not
Right.
we could produce something
We have a
similar.
television studio, we want to produce something similar. Of course, we're not going to be able to produce our own by next Wednesday, but
Yeah,
the presentation will be PowerPoint and the use of two videos. One happens to be run on YouTube. It's a shorter version. It's really like a promotional video. That was from the Simsbury Public Schools. And then the interview, I'm going to take pieces out of that interview and work it into our presentation. There's a lot of confusion or misunderstanding or inaccurate perceptions about the Hartford Open Choice Program and how it affects our schools and all of that. So the committee thought it would be best to have a presentation, make it available to the public, and then of course I'll send out a written communication with all the presentation material attached to it for those that may not be able to make it.
And will that ultimately be on the website as well?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
And I want to video it and actually give it to our cameraman who's sitting in the corner.
Cool. All right, Mrs. Young.
So the meeting will be next Monday at 5:30 at the Capital Region Education Council, which is located at 34 Sequanson Street in Hartford in room 269.
Excellent, thank you. Last item is resuming periodic publication of board notes. My understanding is that
Board
that...
brief. Sorry.
Board briefs,
We've already
sorry.
addressed it.
All right, so it's already been addressed, and so we're all set on that one. Got it. Excellent, thank you, Mr. Mulla. Finance, Mr. Spivak.
Don't really have much to add in terms of finance to Heather's report. She always does a good job. The one thing we also talked about was choice data, which is provided in our package. And also, she provides an update on the town-wide committee discussing telecommunications and exploring lease options in that process. That's it.
Excellent, thank you. Personnel, Mrs. Howard?
So we met for ground rules with the paraeducators unit, and this may come as a big surprise, but our next meeting with them and the support staff was snowed out. And so we are meeting on April 5th.
Okay, April 5, those meetings are not open to the public, but
No.
you have a member of the Board of Finance with you.
They are non-meetings.
Oh.
It's not a certified.
No,
Okay, so they aren't coming. Got it.
I just have a question. The timing allows for us to get to the tri-board meeting, right?
Different night.
Different night, thank God.
April
I
5th.
mixed up.
The
Oh, no,
5th
no,
is-
no.
no,
There's
that
usually a
was-
workshop that night.
It's a workshop, yes.
Yes,
The
On the-
timing is yes.
There's the 3rd and then there's the 5th.
This is early.
Right.
So the 5th, we had
Starts
the
at
4, 4:30, and 7. So
Yes.
we could do all
All right,
three.
so all three, okay. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure.
In the budget season, I tend to get confused. All right, policy, Mrs. Zaroli.
The minutes are explicit, so that tells you what we're going to discuss. And also, it will be, as always, the first Tuesday, April 4th at 7 at the annex. Thanks.
Okay. Mrs. Shute, representative to the Curriculum Council, Professional Development Council.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, something like that.
Our
It's a
next-
long title.
Yes, our next meeting will be in May, is that correct? Yeah, date to be determined.
It's determined, I just can't remember.
Okay,
I think
that's
it's
fine.
8th, but I'm not positive.
All right, thank you.
All right. Mr. Burke, board representative to the Avon Board of Finance.
The Board of Finance did not meet since our last meeting, and the next meeting is on Monday, the 27th, and Kathy volunteered to go in my absence, so thank you.
Excellent. Let's see, Town Council, Mrs. Rell?
We all had the opportunity to meet with the town council the first Thursday in March.
Yeah.
Yes. Board representative to CREC, Mrs. Blea.
Their meeting was canceled, so I have nothing to report until next Wednesday. Snow, I think it was last Wednesday maybe.
All right, so the last item of the public agenda is communications from the public. Does anyone wish to say anything? I noticed the young lady who had her hand up before seems to have left. Meeting fatigue probably set in. Does anyone else have anything to say? Going once, going twice. All right, can I have a motion to go into executive session for the 4 items?
So moved.
Mrs. Zaroli moves.
Second.
Mrs. Howard seconds. All in favor? Aye. We are going into executive session at 8:56.